Here at Rockville, we understand how much time and energy you put into researching your car audio components. When you have everything in your shopping cart, the last thing you have to do is buy a wiring kit. If you look on eBay or Amazon, you'll find that they range from $15 to $150, and that's an extremely wide price gap. Why is that? This is why Rockville decided the only way to know the difference is to test a variety of cables from different manufacturers to see if the more expensive cables really actually outperform the cheaper cables. So we hired an independent electrical engineer and he built us a rig for wire testing. The main criteria of our test was to find out if our reference amplifier produced the same wattage no matter which cable of the same gauge was hooked up to it. In plain English, this means, are we losing power by buying a cheaper cable? There's no sense in buying a really good amplifier if an inferior wiring kit ends up costing you power. Our test rig was hooked up to a 450 watt amplifier with a 14.4 volt power supply, which is more than enough to equal your car's battery. We then wired our reference amplifier to the power supply and adjusted the power supply so that the amplifier was receiving 14.4 volts at the amplifier terminals. Our test rig was then hooked up to an audio precision computer which will display the amplifier power while the test rig shows the voltage and amperage draw. We conducted 3 tests, a 0, 4, and 8 gauge test comparing Rockville cables against other popular brands like Kicker and Rockford Fosgate. This test was done at a 2 ohm load on our reference amplifier. Voltage at the terminals was 14.4 volts and the reference wattage at 743 watts RMS. So now let's jump into the Rockford Fosgate test. But before we start, I do want to tell you each cable was cut to exactly the same length and each test was run for 5 minutes. So let's fast forward to the end and talk about the results. As you can see, the voltage at the amplifier changed to only 14.24 volts, a drop of 0.16 of a volt, and the amplifier's wattage dropped to 718.1 watts. These are fantastic results, exactly what you would expect from Rockford Fosgate. Now let's see how the Kicker cables did. The voltage dropped to 14.23 volts, almost the same as the Rockford ones, and the amp power was just slightly higher at 721.1 watts. Now let's see how the DB-Link cables did. The voltage dropped to 13.88 volts and the amperage power was 685.9 watts. So price is definitely an important factor in this equation. I want to point out that 100% oxygen-free copper kits will consistently perform at similar test ratings, while other kits with a mix of aluminum and copper, over time, the wire will heat up and there will be signal loss. So now it's time for the challenger, the Rockville 100% copper cables. Whoa! The voltage dropped to 14.23 volts just like the Kicker cables, and the amplifier produced 719.3 watts. These results are on par with the Kicker and Rockford Fosgate wiring kits because they are all made of 100% oxygen-free copper, and this is why you'll have minimal signal loss. If you want to see how our 4 and 8 gauge cables stacked up, please make sure to click these annotations. Thank you.